enough for everyone to flourish. He developed that point at some length. He talks about pegging that guaranteed income to the median income. He talks about having a floor that's so high that if you're on the floor, you still have enough to flourish. And he goes on to say that this proposal is not a civil rights program in the sense that that term is currently used. He estimated that it was going to cost $20 billion per year. And he encouraged that we make this investment. And he concludes the chapter by saying, and I quote, "The curse of poverty has no justification in our age. It is socially as cruel and blind as the practice of cannibalism at the dawn of civilization, when men ate each other because they had not yet learned to take food from the soil or to consume the abundant life around them. The time has come for us to civilize ourselves by the total, direct, and immediate abolition of poverty." And the very next chapter is titled "The World House," and he expands that program to a global effort, that is, to abolish poverty globally. No poor people on planet Earth. Now, one of the peculiar things about King's prescriptions for abolishing poverty, he says that he would prefer to abolish poverty by providing good jobs for everyone. That is, people need good jobs that make constructive contributions to society, and he would prefer full employment. Then he went on to say, but if that should fail, we are not going to let that stop us from abolishing poverty. If there's not a good job available, there still should be a good income available. The thinking was that unemployed people need good income as much as employed people. And if we can provide the employment, then we can at least provide the income. So guarantee good income is what King was prescribing to abolish poverty. And if that means spending $20 billion a year, let's do it. Where is this money going to come from? People ask. And King said, let's take it out of the military budget. Okay. After all, we're committed to nonviolence anyway, so we don't need all of that stuff. He goes on to estimate that, in fact, it would take just 2% of gross national product annually for a period of 10 to 20 years to abolish poverty. 2% of gross national product for a period of 10 or 20 years would abolish poverty. That is, if we had done this in 1967, poverty would be abolished now. And he goes on at great length. He has a chapter called Programs and Prospects, in which he puts forth his ideas for abolishing poverty, and it is his hope that others will take up the cause and come up with their ideas for abolishing poverty. But I need not remind you that since 1967, that conversation has not taken place. That is, the idea of abolishing poverty is not even part of our public discourse at all. Well, King calls us to put that on our agenda. That is, we need to be committed to abolishing poverty, and if you don't like King's ideas for abolishing poverty, then we need to come up with some other ideas for abolishing poverty. And King's open to the possibility that there might be better ideas for doing it. And his message was simply that we should be fully committed to doing this and doing it quickly. The total, direct, and immediate abolition of poverty. So this year when we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, pull this out and remind people that King prescribed the total, direct, and immediate abolition of poverty. And though many of us think it can't be done, Wesleyans are in the habit of doing the impossible. And furthermore, there are biblical warrants for abolishing poverty. Again, Luke chapter 4, Isaiah 61, and there are a number of other biblical warrants as well. That is, the gospel, the authentic Christian gospel, is good news to the poor. And this good news to the poor needs to be such good news that when they receive it, they are rendered not poor. Okay? That's the kind of good news to the poor that Jesus prescribed. And that's the kind of good news to the poor that we need to be pushing if indeed we are presenting a gospel that's good enough to be called Christian. Okay. Now, those of us who are helping the poor to be a little less miserable in their continuing poverty, that's good as far as it goes, but it doesn't go far enough to qualify as Christian gospel. Okay. That's maybe United Way gospel, or you know, some other charitable version of the gospel. But what distinguishes the Christian gospel from all of these lesser gospels is that this good news is such good news that when people receive it, poverty is abolished, and then we recognize that this is a recurring problem, and so we're going to have to do it again and again and again. So let's just get ready and do it, and then prepare to do it again. But we haven't done it the first time yet. So let's do it the first time. Thank you. Oh, sure.
Let me, before we start questions, and I know you have many, I'd like to go ahead and pass the basket around.
Yes, sir.
I have heard in the last year that in the defense budget, I wish I could remember the specifics, but it's been said that there is a huge amount of our defense resources currently that are being deployed for Cold War means, and that all that we have to do is merely abolish what's been continues to be set aside in missile systems and all of the whatever's involved in defense that's relating to the Cold War, which has been over for, what, 25 years or so. And that's all I've heard. I haven't heard anything since then. I don't know whether there's a commission or I thought there was supposed to be somebody who was going to be taking this up and running with it on some prominent level. I haven't heard anything.
Well, even Bill Gates is trying to cut some of it, not huge, but some.
Well, I'm counting on the Methodists to take that one up. Just because they're in the habit of doing the impossible.
Where do we start? Who do we see? Who do we talk to? You know, I'd like to know as a citizen.
Well, you know,
who are the people at the top that we need to get in touch with? How do we form the alliances or the groups of people?
Well, first of all, we need some good ideas about how to do it. And a good place to begin that conversation is by revisiting Martin Luther King Jr. And then coming up with our own ideas and perhaps some better ideas.
The project's already well underway, I believe. It sounds to me very much like what you're talking about. It's called the Millennium Development Goals. This country's been dragging their feet on it for a number of years now. But a lot of other countries are doing a hell of a lot better job than we are. And the goal is to eliminate poverty.
That's true, yes.
And it's started by Christians, as I understand it.
And the United Methodist Church has made some commitments in that direction as well. So it's not like the movement is at absolute zero. It is somewhat underway, but it is burdened with the presumption that, again, the best we can do is help the poor be a little less miserable in their continuing poverty, and that's our highest aspiration. And so we need to get more aggressive to have higher aspirations. And there's a piece of me that says, you know, when you're talking to the professionals, the economists, the public policy makers, their first response to the idea of abolishing poverty, especially the media directly, is it can't be done. So we've got to do something lesser. And I think an appropriate churchly response should be what I would call a Christian capitalist response. That is this: I'll pay you $1 million to figure out how to do it. And I bet you a lot of those professionals will turn on a dime and figure out how to do the impossible, because we are making it profitable for them to figure out how to do the impossible. Right now, all of the profits are funneled into this kind of projects, right? So if you want to make some big money, the way to do it is to figure out how to make Goldman Sachs even richer. You know, 1,000% is not good enough. You know, let's make it 2,000%. Well, there's a lot of money to be made in engaging in that kind of project. Well, we Christian capitalists ought to invest some money, some big money, into abolishing poverty and you know, make it a profitable thing. You know, so I'll go to graduate school and get a PhD in the abolition of poverty, because I know when I come out the other side, I can abolish my own poverty by abolishing some other poverty. I mean, you know, we can put capitalism to work on our side, is what I'm saying. Yes, Suzanne Johnson.
Oh, thank you. This has been very provocative. One of the best things, or most helpful things, was your couching this in terms of the fact that the impossible has been possible before. That's so helpful. We just need to keep saying that over and over and over again, because the problem is so enormous. It just feels overwhelming. And I guess one thing we could study is, well, what were the concrete strategies by which the impossible became possible? I mean, what were they doing at the grassroots? And what can we learn from that? And I have a figure, I have a thought that we would probably have to change the way we do education in local churches, even among us progressives, because so much of our educational efforts, as far as I can see, over the past several decades, has been focused on just consumption of information. In other words, a Sunday school class, they'll go read a book, discuss it, and then leave. The next book comes along that's their age, progressives get it, read it, talk about it, leave. And rather than translating our passion into grassroots incremental action over a period of time, which is, I've been trying over the last several years to study, you know, what were the strategy of citizenship schools like the Highlander Center and these citizenship schools all over the South. It was a very different way of thinking about education than how we use our educational apparatus in all of our denominations. And that would be my passion as a person who teaches Christian education, is just the dream we can change how we think education ought to go on.
Well, I think
Amen to that.
it's the Cox School at SMU, and some of the graduate students do things like how to sell a pair of toothbrushes as their project, how to sell toothpaste with a toothbrush. I'm not joking. That was one of the projects of some young people that I knew. But $1 million grant to come up with a plan to abolish poverty. And, you know, the business degrees have been terrifically influential in both adjusting the economy, reducing costs by terminating people, by charging more. You know, they're the ones who pull the levers. I think it'd be cool to get some wealthy Wesleyan to do that, to go to Cox and say, let's make this a graduate degree